What's going on, movie fans? My name is Michael Weir. I love talking about movies, and 2023 was quite the mixed bag of movies in my personal opinion. We had some great movies come out, and we had some bad movies come out. And while we are going to cover the top 10 best movies of the year in another video, this video will cover the top 10 worst movies released in 2023. Now, keep in mind, this list of top 10 worst movies is my own personal list. These are the movies that I had the worst experiences with, or I think were the worst made movies of 2023. And there's always a little bit of that, isn't there? There's a little bit of my own personal taste, and then there's the film itself, and then there's the experience I had while watching the movie. Some of these movies might be higher up in your list if you had a better experience, a more enjoyable experience, and they may be lower on mine because of the opposite reason. So with that all in mind, my list probably won't match your list, and I would love to know what the top 10 worst movies of 2023 are in your opinion. And if you've got a list of top 10, throw that in the comment section down below, because I'd love to know what yours is, and we can go back and forth where we agree, where we disagree. And finally, guys, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure you do that. I've got a ton of content on here. If you like these end of year lists, I've been putting out several over the last couple days, and I have a few more left to come. We're going to talk about the top 10 best movies of the year soon, and we are also going to talk about all 100 movies that I saw in 2023, and I'm going to tier list rank them all for you, so keep a lookout for that. But like I said, if you like those kind of videos on YouTube where people talk about ranked lists of movies, or even Blu-ray talk, I've got a ton of them back there. I love to talk about them all the time. Or maybe you just like movie reviews, well, I've got a ton of that content right here on my channel, and I would love for you to subscribe. With all that said, let's talk about the top 10 worst movies of 2023. One last thing before jumping into my top 10 list here, guys, is that I will not be having any honorable mentions this year. Every year previous that I've done these top 10 lists, I've always had a couple honorable mentions, but since I'm doing that 100 movie tier list ranking video in a couple days, I figure I'll save my thoughts on those movies for another day. So these are the 10 that I believe are the top 10 worst, and I will not be doing honorable mentions. Let's move on to number 10. At number 10, we have Meg 2, The Trench. This is a movie starring Jason Statham and a big, gigantic shark, and it should work because I actually really enjoyed the first Meg movie. I thought it was fun, enjoyable, throwaway summer monster movie. It was a good time, and I was hoping for the same out of the Meg 2. Unfortunately, we didn't end up getting that exciting, fun, monster action movie of the summer. This year, we got Jason Statham and then several other movies ripped off at the same time. Jason Statham in this movie just gives one-liners the whole time, including one where he calls a guy old chum as he throws him to a shark. So old chum could mean like he's your friend, but chum is shark food, so he's going to say that to him as he throws him off a pier into a shark's mouth. And if that line of dialogue and the delivery of that line of dialogue wasn't bad enough, my experience in the theater personally was I was sitting there a couple seats over from this woman who every time Jason Statham would make some sort of a funny pun, which is basically every line he gives in this movie, she would go, oh. And while I was glad she was having a good time, she was having almost too good of a time, so I was getting a little nervous on my end, like, should I leave? What's going to happen here? But yeah, my experience with this movie was kind of tainted because of that lady, but overall, the movie itself is not very good. And like I said, it rips off several movies, but one in particular that it irritated me with ripping off was a movie called Underwater. And Underwater is a movie about a group of people on an oil rig under the ocean, that the oil rig gets damaged, something happens, and they have to walk across the ocean floor in these big mech suits to try and get to a safety station. And they take that entire plot of that movie and just make it a subplot in this movie. And I'm not saying that it is an absolute original idea for Underwater, but I'd never seen anything before Underwater, and it just seemed like they stole that from them. They're like, hey, not too many people saw Underwater. They're not going to know. Let's just steal that plot and mix it into this movie. Overall, the Meg 2 was not a fun time for me. I didn't have an enjoyable monster movie of the summer like I was hoping to have, and Jason Statham really just needs to get out of the genre, go back to the action genre where he thrives, in my opinion. Let's move on. At number 9, guys, we have Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon. Now, Rebel Moon belongs on this list because Zack Snyder himself said, guys, this isn't the movie I want you to watch. This isn't the movie that I made. This is a different kind of movie. The director's cut will not only take this movie in a different direction, but it will be a whole different movie. And so for that reason alone, Rebel Moon belongs on this list, because why would you give us the not director's cut of a movie the director has full control over the entire time? It makes absolutely no sense. But when you get into this movie, when you're like, okay, but it's still Zack Snyder at the helm, I'm going to check this movie out. Hopefully it's good. The color grading sucks in this movie. There's too much monologuing, telling you too much instead of showing you too much. And the thing is, you've got part 1 and part 2 set up, and it's Netflix. You could have a 4-hour movie if you wanted to, but somehow they still have to monologue these huge gaps of time to you because there's not enough time for them to tell the whole story in this movie. And that was annoying. And finally, my biggest annoyance in this movie is the whole first movie sets up gathering these people up to take on the bad guys. And when you finally get all the people recruited and in the same place, good guys here, bad guys here, they don't show off any of their cool powers. They don't show off any of the cool things they can do. They're just like, yeah, we're here, we're gonna have a shootout, and then maybe you'll see their powers in the next movie. Again, with Zack Snyder saying this wasn't the movie that he wanted to release, it had to be on this list. It's number 9. At number 8, guys, we have the supposed to be funny movie, No Hard Feelings, but I hardly laughed at all. The concept of this movie is creepy in and of itself. The movie is led by Jennifer Lawrence, who plays a woman who is hired by Matthew Broderick's character and his wife to sleep with their 19-year-old son. So it's a creepy premise in general, because especially if you flipped this and it was an adult man who was paid to sleep with their 19-year-old daughter, this movie would have been canceled before it even got out of the gate. But because Hollywood is Hollywood, and this is a woman sleeping with a younger man, it's totally fine, it's totally good. But with that said, I went and saw it anyway, and I was hoping to laugh. I was like, okay, if this is going to be the comedy movie of the year, I want to check it out. So I watched this movie, and again, the laughs just weren't there for me personally. Nothing in this movie was memorable to me. You had Jennifer Lawrence, big moment in this movie where she comes out completely nude, and it was like, why is this a thing? Like, why is that considered comedy now? There weren't too many very funny movies that actually came out this year. I think Strays is probably my favorite comedy of the year, and this is so far down on the comedy level from that movie Strays. So No Hard Feelings is number 8. And number 7, guys, we have the movie The Nun 2. The Nun 2 is in the Conjuring universe, and originally this wasn't on my worst of list, and I was thinking about it after I did my horror movie list, and I was like, no, I think this belongs on the worst of list because it's coming from the Conjuring universe. You've got a character as important as Valak, the demon nun, as your main star, the title character of your movie, and then you end up showing me all of the good parts, all of the jump scares, all of the great moments of this movie in the trailer 3 months before the movie releases. And then you play it before every single movie leading up to the movie. So when I get to the movie, I'm like, surely they didn't show me everything. And then you get through this movie and you're like, they showed me that, they showed me that, they showed me that, they showed me that. The only thing they didn't show me is the final scene in this movie, but the final scene in this movie is essentially the final scene from the first Nun movie, where everybody's after this artifact, including the nun, and the good guys get to the artifact first, and they find a way to defeat the demon nun again. And it's just like, you just wash, rinse, repeat the first Nun movie with different jump scares. That's all you did. This movie had the potential of being great. It's coming out of the Conjuring universe, and it just fell flat. So that's why it's number 7. At number 6, guys, we have the movie Hypnotic. And Hypnotic might have had the most potential of any movie on this list. It's directed by Robert Rodriguez. It's got an interesting plot, an interesting idea with hypnosis, and it stars Ben Affleck. So between all of those 3 things, I was in. I was excited for this movie. I went and sat down for this movie, and I absolutely couldn't wait for this thing to be over. The movie is like a Christopher Nolan concept if Christopher Nolan gave 10% effort into a project. That's what it feels like. And then you get to the end of this movie and there's about 10 twist endings, and that's 9 too many for my brain. I couldn't wait for the credits to roll on this thing. It was an abysmal time in the theater. I don't recommend it to everyone. So it's number 6. All right, guys, we made it to the top 5 of the worst movies of 2023, and 4 of these top 5 are actually horror movies, and I've already covered all of the horror movies in another video, so I'm sorry for recovering here, but that's the thing about horror movies. If they're not great, if they don't wow me, if there's not something about them that's special, they're going to be toward the bottom of the list. And so the next 4 movies we talk about are all horror movies, so I'm just giving you a fair warning there. But the number 1 movie is not horror, so stick around for that one. But at number 5, guys, we have Skinamarink. Now, Skinamarink is an experimental horror film, and I know there's a ton of people out there that really liked what the director was going for. I didn't get it at first. It's a movie that I walked out of when I saw it in theaters originally, and then most recently, I rewatched it here at home. I did a video for it right here on my channel where I actually reviewed the movie all the way through. And while I understand what the director was going for, I think it's a terrible way to show a movie in a theater. It worked a a lot better for me here at home. So I think if it's something that was like a Shudder exclusive or something that somebody had told me like, hey, wait for this at home, you'll have a better experience with the lights off, you're at home. Because I'll tell you what, in the theater with all the muffled sounds and the fuzzy screen, it's just a horrible way to experience a movie. But at home, watching the movie with the lights off down here in my basement and then turning off the TV at night, going to sleep, waking up in the middle of the night when everything's kind of hazy, I was like, oh, kind of get what he was going for. I mean, it's that childlike imagination. So the children would be looking to the top of door frames. You know, they may not be looking directly at whatever the entity is because they don't want to look at directly whatever the entity is. And I thought that was a cool idea. So there were some cool concepts in here, but just because of the way this film is given to the viewer to experience, to me, it's number 5. And number 4, guys, is a faith-based horror film that I was not aware of being a faith-based horror film until I went to see it, and that is Nefarious. Nefarious is a movie that is about a demon-possessed man and an atheist having a conversation for an hour and a half. And that's not a great concept, so that's not what they sold you in the trailer. They sold you like this demon possession movie, death row. And then what you end up getting is like this biblical conversation between the two of them where they talk about all the different hot button issues. And the thing that bothered me the most about this movie is that the demon has the high ground to the atheist. And unfortunately, the people that made this movie, you can kind of tell that's how they look at atheists. They look at them as like, well, at least demons know there's a God, so they are better than atheists. So that irritated me. But the thing that really put this at number 4 for me was that Glenn Beck shows up at the end, and I just have never liked Glenn Beck. And so the fact that he's in this movie at the end to sort of give it some validity to that crowd just bothered me. So I'm not a big fan of Glenn Beck, not a big fan of this movie. Nefarious, number 4. And number 3, guys, we have Children of the Corn, another rebooted horror franchise that just needs to die and be done. You actually get to see he who walks behind the rose in this movie. And I'm going to say it for the last time here in 2023, it should have been he who stalks. He's made of corn stalks. It makes sense. It's a good joke. I've just used it 80 times on this channel. But moving on, you have he who walks behind the rose comes out in this movie, and he just looks like Groot if Groot was made of corn. That's it. And then the lead character burns him. And that's how they end the movie. The movie has terrible writing, terrible acting, and then just the plot. It's like they didn't give themselves enough time for this movie, because when the kids decide to enact their plot where they're going to take over the town, they're going to kill all the adults, all of a sudden, they've just got all the adults. That's it. They've just got them all right away. Had I not brought friends with me to see this movie, I would have walked out of this movie. There's no doubt in my mind. Children of the Corn deserves the number 3 spot. At number 2 is the last horror movie that we'll talk about on this list, and that is Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. This is a movie where it's an interesting concept. It really is, because I loved Winnie the Pooh as a kid, and so as an adult, getting to experience Winnie the Pooh in an adult concept, like a horror movie, a slasher movie, that's cool to me. But then when you just have this generic bear mask and this generic pig mask, and you throw them on 2 redneck dudes who just have normal hands the entire time, like there's no effort put into this movie at all. It's just, hey, we got the IP for Winnie the Pooh. We're going to use Winnie the Pooh and Piglet, and they're going to attack people in the woods, and that'll be enough. Now, listen, I understand this movie's on a very low budget, and they've got a better budget for part 2, so maybe in part 2 they'll be able to prove their concept a little better. But we are talking about part 1 here, and part 1 definitely was one of the worst this year. I will never revisit Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey is number 2. All right, guys, we made it to the last movie on my worst of movies of 2023, and the last movie on my list here is Till Death Do Us Part. This is a movie about a woman and a man who are assassins for an elite assassin group, and they decide they want to get married, and that's where the movie opens on their wedding day. And then on her wedding day, she decides not only does she not want to marry this guy, but she also doesn't want to be a part of the elite assassin group anymore, and so she gets the hell out of there. Well, the elite assassin group can't let that slide, and so they send not only the groom, but her 7 deadly groomsmen after her. So that's the setup for this movie. And with that setup, I was interested. I saw the plot synopsis and I was like, okay, this might be a fun, like, shoot 'em up action thriller. Could be a good time. But instead of a fun, like, espionage action thriller, we ended up getting a goofy movie when it involved the 7 deadly groomsmen, or we got a boring movie when it involved anything else in this movie. So each groomsman has a theme. And what I mean by that is that there's like one guy who's a little guy, and there's another guy who's a big guy, and they of course get teamed up because it's going to be funny. And then they have another guy who's probably the most obnoxious of all the groomsmen, and all he does throughout this movie is dance his way through rooms. Like, so they know where she went, so they automatically go there, and he starts putting on records and then swing dancing his way through the house till he finds her. There's even a moment where they know she's escaping out of her bedroom window on the roof, and they're like, let's go outside and get her. He's like, yeah, let's go. But first, puts on a record, and he sort of dances his way through the house. And so I'm sitting there watching this movie, and I'm like, who greenlit this? Who thought that was a good idea for a character in any movie, let alone an assassin espionage movie? But like I said, where this movie is not goofy, it is boring, because half of the runtime of this movie is exploring the couple, the man and wife, before they were married, where they have to pose as man and wife on an assassin mission where they have to take this guy out on his boat. And so they go out on this boat with this guy, and the whole half of this movie is just them having a conversation with this guy and him going on and on and on and on. And it's so boring. So between how boring this movie was and how frustratingly goofy the rest of this movie was, it all comes down to the bride and groom having this weird dance/action moment with each other, and none of it worked for me. Overall, Till Death Do Us Part is the worst movie that I saw in 2023. It's the worst experience of a movie that I had in 2023, and I would like to never think about it again, and so from this time forward, I won't speak of it. But with that said, though, guys, those are the worst movies that I had a chance to see in 2023, and I'd love to know what yours are. So if you have the top 10 worst of 2023, throw that in the comment section down below. Let me know what you saw that you think is the worst. And finally, guys, if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. All right, guys, we got to the end of the top 10 worst movies of 2023, and I know this is a negative video, but I'm really not trying to be a negative person here on my channel. I'm trying to give you guys as much content positively as I can, because I do enjoy talking about movies. It's not something that's a chore for me. I really do genuinely love talking about movies, and this is my outlet. So for those of you who joined me in 2023 to talk about movies, and now we've gotten to the end and I'm doing all my lists here, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Can't wait to see what we get in 2024.